here we are. I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And this is a special little CODA episode for the Whatever Comes Next episode 100 DIY special that I put out with, in order of appearance, Dave Brenner of Earsplit PR, who also appeared on episode 103 in his capacity as Gridfailure, Greg Meisenberg of Nefarious Industries and A Fucking Elephant, amongst other projects, Steve Austin of Today is the Day, and also Supernova Records, Urlo, Lou, and Poia of Supernatural Cat, Malleus, and Ufomammut between them, Dan Emery of Black Matter Mastering, as well as bands like Phaeton, and Andreas Kohl of Exile On Mainstream. And I brought all these people together, thanks to Dave of Earsplit PR, to discuss various different topics around the world of DIY music making today, talking about their own personal experiences, their parts in the music world, whether it's music makers, production, PR, running labels. We talked about various different practicalities, the realities of touring, of booking shows, of the situation with shipping, labels, various different topics. But one of the things which I didn't fit into the episodes is one question and one conversation that I got into with everyone, which was about particular musical experiences that had inspired my guests, which led to various different conversations about the different music that we appreciated. So I thought it was a nice topic to put together into one little extra episode, which you are viewing here right now. I will put various links for everybody involved. Dave Brenner as Gridfailure, Steve Austin with Today is the Day have both got new records that have just come out recently, which are tremendous. Urlo has got a record that's just come out as his solo project, The Mon. You can connect with me on various social media at Tom Osman Sounds. You can go to my website if you'd like to check out my music and my writings about my music at tomosmansounds.com. And that is that. The conversations will get underway now with Dave Brenner starting, talking about a life-changing musical experience for him.
I guess what you're asking, it was probably when I first saw Neurosis. Like I had heard the name Neurosis, and I think I heard something at that point. I probably heard because I was more in the punk scene and everything. I'd probably heard some of the earlier stuff and just hadn't grabbed me, in passing or whatever. But it's my senior year of high school, and I ended up going down. It was 95 or 96. It was during that winter. I believe it was 96. Went down to Philadelphia and just saw, hey, Neurosis is playing tonight. I was just down there skating with a friend or something, and we just saw it advertised. We hadn't even planned on going to a show, and it was at the Trocadero, and we said, yeah, we're here. Let's just go in. Paid 15 whatever bucks it was, and went in and had no idea what to expect. And it was a fairly empty show. The Troc was a big old huge theater, old, turn of the century, show theater and everything. And it was fairly empty, not empty, but it wasn't this huge sold out rock metal show everybody running around. It was very subdued and just dark and weird, just the atmosphere of the crowd and everything. And then Neurosis came on, and it was the scariest thing I'd ever heard in my life. It was one of those things where like you're like, you were getting that goose flesh and that the hair on the back of your neck raised up. This weird, this seemed like an extrasensory sort of thing. It was so immersive and heavy and rhythmic, and they were still doing like, this would have been as Through Silver and Blood was probably just coming out. So the bulk of the material I was hearing was, Souls at Zero, Enemy of the Sun, and probably some from, through Silver. And to this day, I still think Souls at Zero is the scariest record. Like I bought it that night at the show. I bought a shirt, everything else, and that record alone and that show changed everything. I was already into, death metal and extreme, things, whatever. So it wasn't like it was like new to metal, new to punk, or new to hardcore or anything, but it was just something about their performance. Where it did reach that, I guess, sort of existential or extrasensory or next level sort of thing. It made me think about everything differently. You know, a combination of styles, an anti-genre. I don't know. There was something so immersive, and this was still also. It was the first time I had probably seen a band do a big visual presentation like that, and this would have still been when Pete Inc. was doing their visuals, and like a lot of fans only saw when Josh Graham was doing their visuals, and his stuff is incredible, and it's totally captivating for like the later era of the Neurosis stuff. But the Pete Inc. stuff was so dark, it was so gritty, it was like you felt like you were almost watching something you shouldn't be watching. You were trying to figure out if it was like a snuff film or like like it was, you didn't know what you were watching half the time. And then Bud Dwyer shooting himself, blowing his head off on live TV, looped for like 10 minutes at the end, and they were all just sitting there ripping and doing these crazy tribal percussive things. I'm getting like goosebump, like I'm all like shivery right now thinking about it, just remembering that and just watching that guy blow his head off. Oh, because I saw that happen when I was a kid. My mom tried to jump in front of the TV when that was, and I saw that as a kid. So seeing that with this new band that just like 10 minutes straight of this guy blowing his head off and people freaking out and like and just it ended, and whoever was in that crowd that might have been half capacity or less at the Trocadero was just screaming, was like, you know, like it was like the best thing anybody there had witnessed. It was unreal. And yeah, to this day, like I said, it's still, that's one of those things where you're just like, that changed everything. That opened up whole entirely new labels to listen to and styles of music and everything. And and then how many solo records and side projects and other things have they all done over the years? And they're one of those bands where you're not like, most Neurosis fans might not go and say, hey, like, not to throw Von Till over the bus, like his records might not be as important to a lot of Neurosis fans as the Neurosis records, but they're pretty close. And almost all Neurosis fans are going to immediately go hear that and going, you know what I mean? And it's just so connected, you know what I mean? It's such a weird family that band has kind of started like a whole. Now there's so much post metal and post rock and whatever, post progressive, blood, ambient, whatever, that it's like Neurosis did it first. Like whatever you can call it, like I don't know if they even had a genre tag when Neurosis did that shit. Like it was just Neurosis.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And like, when you go through and you like, even if you listen to Pain of Mind, I mean, I guess Pain of Mind maybe like sort of is easier to fit into a particular kind of like style of music, but then they've got The Word is Law, which is already getting very strange.
that was a big jump. They did some weird Voivod shit and some crass. They were like very inspired by. So there was like some weird dissonant melodies and weird stuff in those first ones. But Souls at Zero was a huge jump for them, and it just really defined them as like this solitary entity. Like just nobody's been able to do that since like that.
Yeah. And it has that really kind of strange, mystical, kind of esoteric aspect to it. It's like something like pantheistic, like there's something going on like about the land and the spirits, and you're like that
Yep.
track Chronology of Survivor, like, what is this about? This is like something from 1,000 years ago.
Enemy of the Sun does the same sort of thing. I think I have a hard time. Sometimes that one fights for one of my favorites, but Souls at Zero is really just that one. Like I said, that really hooked me so early in the catalog that like it just kind of became my favorite. But it's hard to put on any Neurosis record and in that moment not be like, this is the best thing I could be listening to right now. You know what I mean? Enemy of the Sun definitely has that too. Those just hard tribal, just immersive, long rolling, just creepy passages and like, sort of like sample loops and chants and stuff going on in the background, and just these other things. And it's and the more Neurosis would play out and progress, and especially when they stopped doing the visuals, you saw, well, there wasn't a whole lot of keys or anything on those early records, but you could really see that, what Noah was doing was such this huge part of it. Everybody always saw, these guitarists doing the dueling vocals and whatever is kind of like what Neurosis was, but every member of that band has their own thing that makes it what it is. If you took any one of those away, it just simply just, and seeing Noah just pounding on those weird, key like pads he has set up and triggering things and everything else, you're like, once they turned the lights on and you could see what was going on there was, instead of these shadows, and probably acid tripping, insanity with murder happening on the screen behind them in the dark. It's like it kind of shed even like a new sort of light on it, even for long time fans, like a new era of the band at that point. You know what I mean? So it's, yeah, they're just one of those bands with like an impeccable catalog, no matter which, there's definitely different eras, like you said, the more punk stuff and the later stuff's more like that Americana sort of vibe, a little bit more Western or nature inspired or something. And then those middle eras are just, there's three or four in the middle are just some of the most terrifying records to ever, they can't be beaten.
For
So,
sure. Yeah, I feel like I have a similar, even though like the music's not necessarily particularly similar in a lot of ways, but like I have a similar relationship with Neurosis that I do with Killing Joke and with Today is the Day. It's like there are so many different phases and faces of those bands. It's just like I could be in the mood for something at any point from one day to another, and I'm going to get a very different type of satisfaction.
but does your, do you still have a certain favorite, and is it because of it was the first one you heard, or the first time it made an impact, like with Killing Joke, for example? Is there a certain one that was it your first record? Is that your favorite, or is it because this one became your favorite after you were into these three before that?
It's interesting because I think with Neurosis, it's got to be either Souls at Zero, Enemy of the Sun, or Through Silver and Blood. Like those are the ones that I come back to, and they all sort of came around the same time for me.
Yeah.
With Killing Joke, it's kind of tricky because I think when I first heard them, I liked stuff, but it wasn't like I became massively passionate about them. And then just gradually, they just sort of like weeded their way into my psyche. So, yeah, I don't actually know what my favorite Killing Joke record is. Do you have a favorite Killing Joke record?
It's kind of the same thing. They're one of those bands that I wish I got into more earlier. And the older I get, the more I listen to. So it's really hard to say, but honestly, like some of those newer ones, what was the, 2012 or whatever, fuck, what was that one?
Was
There
that
was
the
a
one that was
record
like
that
the
just,
MMX? I forget what the letters were. Yeah,
yep,
that was really cool.
yeah, like don't there was, because we worked with them for like a couple of records, and it was kind of like they kind of broke out into this a newer level of popularity or accessibility or something or whatever at that time. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I see you have Killing Joke right there on display behind you. It's up there.
Yeah, it's
It's
funny
next on
because
tap.
they like I like as well how they did go through, like they had Nighttime, which had some quite it was quite commercially successful, and they did Brighter than a Thousand Suns, which got even more commercial that I actually really like. And I even like Outside the Gate, even though it's
There's a
much
there's a
maligned.
couple in there that are questionable even for diehard fans.
That's true. The rapping
But
is
the
a little
time and a
bit suspect.
place.
Can you think of it, or do any particular moments stand out, whether it was like hearing a record for the first time or like being at a particular show where it was just like a really profound experience that changed your life?
Yeah, like right away, a few things. I'll start in chronological order. My first concert ever, I was 10 years old. It was 1993 or 94, but it was Pink Floyd on their Division Bell tour.
Oh,
My
wow.
dad took me and my brother, and I was like, my dad got us into, the classic rock stuff, Floyd, Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, Sabbath. So like I was listening to that, so I understood what I was witnessing. Like I was 10. I understood that like seeing Pink Floyd was a big deal, that they had basically all but broken up, that like, them coming around was like insane, may never happen again. And I was already listening to the Division Bell album and was a fan of that album as well as Pink Floyd in general. So that like blew my mind because it was a stadium gig, all the works, and that was like a very big, profound, moment for me, wonderful memory. And then when I was probably like 12 or 13, my uncle for my birthday, he got me like whatever was at the top of like the alt rock or hard rock charts at the time in the like 96. And he bought me two cassette tapes, Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream and Offspring's Smash album. I'm not a fan of Offspring, but that one album of theirs is awesome, in my opinion. But I love the Pumpkins, and Siamese Dream is like my favorite record of all time. And I remember just like, from the first time I heard it, it still blows my mind. But like I logged so many hours listening to that tape. You know what I mean? Yeah, like that got me into, they just opened up the world of like what I want to call like, art rock, maybe just that like, because I was always into heavy-ish stuff and like, weirder stuff. And I was never into like straight ahead forms of music. I was never like into, hardcore or like straight ahead punk or like thrash metal. I was always into like the stuff that, blurred around the edges and like blended everything. And so that kind of got me started on that journey of like the music, no matter what it is, could be made, with like feeling and that you don't have to care about labels and stuff. You just do what you think is awesome, do what you think is pretty, and like let someone else worry about whether they think it sucks or not. And then when I was around 15, I saw the Melvins at the old knitting factory in New York City in Manhattan. And during sound check, Dale Crover broke a stick and like it hit me in the face. I still have it. But that was a cool moment because that was like, I was 15. That was like the Melvins were always like they were always big for an underground band, So
Yeah.
that was like really formative for me, like seeing this band operate, like knowing that they're like basically like driving their own van, that they're not out of reach, and they played this small stage at the knitting factory. Like the stage is like knee high, like King Buzzo was like spitting in my face. Like that was a very like visceral experience. And it really, and also like by that time I was in bands playing my own music. So that really informed me. That was like, whoa, I could be doing this, like this is how it could feel and this is how it should feel. And this is how I want it to feel. I don't want it to be this removed experience where, you only get to see what the artist is doing by watching like the big TV, at Madison Square Garden or whatever. And for like the 90s were a crazy time because like Primus and Mr. Bungle were on the radio, you know what I'm saying? So like,
Yeah.
So this was like a time period where bands that wouldn't get as big today got really big then, which was a good thing because you go see them live and it was a different experience to see Primus live or to see the Melvins live compared to seeing like a stadium band live. But in your mind, you're like, well, all those bands are big enough. They're all on the radio. They're all on mainstream radio. So that's the distinction I was able to see. I was like, here's a band that's, had some airplay on mainstream radio, but they're playing these like visceral small shows and that was the vibe that like got me into the culture.
I wanted to turn things around and from your perspective as a fan and appreciator of music, if I ask you to think of a time where you had an experience with music, whether it was hearing a record for the first time or going to a show and having a live experience, does anything stand out where you're like, that was a life-changing experience and just nothing was the same afterwards?
There's a couple of them that I'll do real quick. Like probably one of the earlier on ones was I went to go see Judas Priest with my buddy when I was like 12 or 13 years old. And back in the late 80s when that would have been um you know, they had like 26 full-size Marshall stacks up on stage, and they were all plugged in, and back then there was no like place where you couldn't walk to. Like you could literally walk up and lay your hand on the stage that Judas Priest is on, and the dudes be right up there, maybe 4 or 5 feet back away from the front of it. Um, and so me and my buddy, the minute they opened the doors on Screaming for Vengeance tour, we ran all the way to the front, got right up against that stage, put our hands on top of it, and when they came out and started playing, um, being a kid from the countryside of Tennessee on a farm, I could not believe the level of power and volume that shit did when they started doing it. I mean, it was fucking mind blowing volume and metalness of craziness. And right then, that struck a chord with me of I want to do something like this or whatever, like something heavy and loud. Another one um that blew my mind was seeing the Melvins play on Bullhead in Nashville. Um they come out, they've got like a couple full stacks of gear. Buzz had some weird like stack of cabinets that had like fur and shit as the covering of them, like whether it be zebra striped or tiger or whatever print it was, but it had this fur kind of outside covering stuff, and they laid into it with the Bullhead album, literally rocked to the point of Buzz blacking out at the very end of the show and hitting the ground, and then having to be taken to the hospital and whatnot because it was so hot in there. It made him black out and pass out. That had a huge impact on me. Um, and another an odd one was this one's funny. A long time ago, um, when I was playing in Alien in the Land of Our Birth, uh like this had the drummer of the first three Today's the Day albums, Brad Elrod, in it, and me, and two other fellows named Chris Fry and Upshaw Carter. And so both super sick musicians and whatnot. But anyways, long story short, we were playing in this band, and at some point we were gonna go see this band called the Jesus Lizard play in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so we hopped in the car and on a typical like a band on going to go see a band, going to see somebody else play, riding up there smoking doobies, all excited about going to see this concert. And so we go to this concert, and Knoxville, Tennessee is like not really a real big city, but it's still big enough because like the University of Tennessee is there. Um, and it's not, and there wasn't really that big of an underground punk scene there either. But we went to this place, and we walk in, and there were all these people who were really, really, really freaky that were there. And I mean, like the freakiness level was like at an all-time high max of crowd that was at this shit. So you almost knew before they were gonna play that something pretty wild was going to go down. And just by who came to the concert, people that you would never see or whatever coming out of the woodwork to go see this. And those guys played, and right off the bat, David Yow's got his he's got his fucking pants down and his dick and balls out, and it just a grossness overload going on of like the dude on all fours with his ass sticking out, spitting up all over himself. The bass player looking like he's special needs with his eyeballs rolled back in his head. There was the off kilterness of the music and everything going on, sinister sounding vibes. Um, I found it to be the most disturbing shit that I had ever seen in my life. Like being there, I don't know the combination of all those things that I was just talking about. Even though I liked things like that, um, I experienced and it's such a huge level. It blew my fucking mind. And it blew my mind so much because this was like a turning point or a pivotal moment in my life of just trying to like figure out like what I wanted to do, who I wanted to do it with, all that kind of stuff. That after that show was over with, those dudes in Jesus Lizard freaked me out so bad that I literally went to our practice room. I got every bit of my equipment and I said, fuck this shit. And I drove 550 miles away from Nashville back to my home in Michigan because there I was just absolutely disturbed about this shit about the Jesus Lizard. It was something about with the guys that I was jamming with, like I questioned like where are we coming from here, like meaning, and like is this the right thing to do? Like I literally felt like after going to see the Jesus Lizard play, that I was going straight, if there was one, that I was going straight to hell now, no matter what. Just because of like being at this show. It was that fucked up. And um then later I was at home and I ended up talking with Brad on the phone and I explained this stuff to him. I was like, man, I'd like to come back down there to continue working on this, but that shit was really, really crazy. And I'm not so sure about all this. And so I thought about it more and, it I finally came to terms with it. I ended up going back down there and whatnot because I enjoyed playing with him enough that it made me want to go back down there because I felt like I had the very best drummer that you could ask for to like play music with. And for him, I said, fuck this. I'm going to go back down there because what we've been working on was really important to me. And I just had to get beyond what the Jesus Lizard had done to my mind about that. And there's a funny irony about this shit at the end of a punchline is that about a couple weeks after I got back to Nashville, I was riding around in the car with my buddy Chris Fry that played bass, a phenomenal bass player, super good friend. And me and him were riding down the road and he had a Walkman with headphones and he was like, hey, check this shit out or whatever. We had been checking out all kinds of different music, but he handed it to me. I put the headphones on my head and he's driving through Nashville and I hit play and I start listening to this and I'm like, wow, like this is fucking cool. Like really cool. Wow. And probably 10 minutes later, after I listened to like two or three songs and whatnot, in my head, I decided, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck this is, but this is fucking cool that you just gave to me. And I took the headphones off and I said to him, I was like, what is this, man? And he's like, it's the Jesus Lizard. The band that fucked me up so bad that I literally packed my shit and left. Like, but it was all perspective and a different moment. 1 minute you're in this seedy club with some of the most tripped out looking people on planet Earth that are super freaks going to see Jesus Lizard play, and then they put on the grossest, most sick display of art that you could experience, and you're not ready for it, and it blows your mind. And then later it became like my favorite thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's a brilliant story. I love it. It's funny, just like as a little thing to tack on at the end there, I never got the chance to see Jesus Lizard back in the day, but now they've reformed. I saw them here in Glasgow last year, I think it was, or the very beginning of this year. And, I've heard all these stories about David Yao. Like, there are so many stories of his on-stage antics. And I was right down the front and I had a beer. And then right at the beginning of the show, he jumped into the audience and he was just kind of above me. So I just kind of like put my hand out. And as he came down, he grabbed my hand. And then I remember thinking to myself, I bet if I like pull my hand away, he'll be like, this guy's a victim. So I was just like, well, this is kind of a nice moment. So I just held his hand. And there was literally for like half a song, we were just holding hands. He's just singing away. And I'm like, this is really weird. I'm like standing here drinking a beer, and I'm holding David Yao's hand. It was like a really nice moment. It's not what I would have expected, but that's what I got.
But it's cool, I mean, that's the beautiful thing to me of music when it's doing it right, is that like every show has the opportunity to be an experience, not what you think it's going to be, of like, oh yeah, these dudes are going to play these badass songs and there's more to it than that. It's like there's all the other little micro things that happen, different little interactions, different moments of all kinds of things. And when you're there, like, it makes it all real, and it makes everything. When I say it makes it all real, I'm meaning like it makes like the life experience real. And I think that that's why, with the fucked up way the world is right now, the one thing that I'm thankful to see is that people are stronger than ever about music, about the role and the importance it plays in their life. And I think the reason why is because of what I'm saying about it makes it all real. It's like you live a world of like notifications on a fucking phone all the time, and then being judged or not judged or approved or not approved through your digital presence in the world. And then if it's not that, we don't even go to the fucking movies anymore. It's like I know there's still movie theaters around, but like that whole experience is pretty much like gone. And now you watch it on your phone, or you watch it on the TV at home. And so there's that last bastion of the real that exists, which is going to a show.
Does anything stand out if I ask you to think of a moment you had in your life? It might be hearing a record for the first time or seeing a band play live, where it was just so powerful that it like changed your life forever after that. A life-changing musical moment, if you can think of something on the spot.
Visually, it was the cover of Metal of Pink Floyd when I was a child. And musically, probably was listening to Lysol of the Melvins for the first time. I remember I was ill, and Poia came with a CD. I put it on the first time. It was like, what is that? It's strange. Then the second time it was, oh, and then it grew so much in me that it was incredible. So probably yes, if the first things that comes to mind are these two for me.
I can say a couple of things as well. I saw Alice in Chains in 1992 or three. I don't remember. In Italy, they played in a place in Milan, and it was my first real concert in my life. The one that I remember, like the very first experience of listening to a proper live band in the perfect moment of my life. And also when I discovered that Led Zeppelin created a record that I didn't knew. It was Physical Graffiti. I discovered that I don't know why this record missed in my collection, but then they did also this record, and I put it in my stereo in my room with the headphones, and it was blown away by music because it was something that it was so new to me, even if it was coming from a band that I knew pretty well, but I was so ignorant at the time that I didn't recognize that they were doing also another record that it was new to me. So it was a nice discover of something that I didn't knew. So it was a moment, a special moment that I recall to memory. Yeah, listening to that record. Actually, lately, this is not my favorite record from them, but that moment I remember vividly because I was so happy that I have discovered something new from a band. So
yeah, I feel like that's maybe that kind of magic isn't so easy to have now that we have things at our fingertips on the internet. But I remember having that kind of, I think I had that with Rollins Band, where I didn't know that there were like two other albums that existed. And then I found one. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I didn't know that this was there.
that was the perfect way of saying that.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm thinking about maybe the first time I was little, like, I don't know, maybe 18, 17, when I listened for the first time Black Sabbath, maybe, because it was something totally different from everything I was listening and in these years, and maybe that was something that changed in some way my way to see the music, because they were more dirty, more aggressive. Also, I was listening normal metal in the 90s. I was listening Nirvana, which they were very different from everything around. But when I listened Black Sabbath, I said, that's totally different from what I'm listening now. So from there, I started to, maybe something was opening to me in some way. Also, when I saw Melvins for the first time live, it was very, oh my God, what is that?
Another experience was the Melvins again, when we went to see, Poia and me went to see Nirvana.
Oh, yeah.
And they were supported by Melvins. And we went up because of the Melvins, mainly because it was, I think, the second to last concert, probably of Nirvana or whatever. So they were quite sad to see them. While Melvins, we were the only two excited.
Yeah.
All the people were, stop it. And we were the only one, yeah.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, interesting. Like, I guess I know that tour I know about that tour of Nirvana because I think Kurt Cobain killed himself before they came to the UK. Because I know people that had tickets to see them in the UK, and then they kept the tickets to have like as a memento for the shows that never happened. So yeah, but that's that's the thing with the Melvins. Through all the time, all the changes, it's like they still keep going. They still remain consistent. You cannot stop the Melvins.
Luckily.
Exactly, indeed. I wonder for you if there are any particular standouts in your life. Doesn't have to be things that you actually worked on, but let's just say, albums you heard, live shows you went to, any particular music related experiences that really had a profound impact on you.
Honestly, and considering that most of the music that I play is aggressive, angry, hardcore, some of the most impactful live performances and like in the studio live performances come from folk artists in my experience. I record a lot of folk artists and work with a lot of folk artists, but a lot of that genre of music is based on the live take. So you'll get a 6 or 7 piece string band that wants to do an entire album completely live in the studio. And that is some of the most profoundly impactful stuff I've ever seen, is when like that many people can be on the same page and precise and just absolutely nail it. And then you'll hear this amazing take, and then somebody in the band will say that was trash, and then they'll do it again and get it just 1% better. It's incredible. So that's something right there that definitely reinstalls my faith in the art world. Just that there's definitely an undercurrent of people who base everything on integrity, and they'll pull through.
Yeah, it's not quite folk music, but kind of to that point of having the real commitment to the performance. I remember a while ago reading this very comprehensive biography of Elvis. And so as I tend to do when I'm reading music biographies, I tend to like really get immersed in listening to that music. And I was listening to those early Sun records recordings and like hearing the performances and thinking like, the production possibilities back then in the early 50s were very different to what they are now. And just like how tight those performances are, and to think of how accomplished you had to be at that point to be able, as well, if you're going to be playing over and over and over and over and over again, to have the skill to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's those recordings, absolutely, 100%. All of the Sun recordings, just that time period when people were recording, it's just so amazing to think about. You listen to a song off of any of those records, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis, any of those people, and you listen to the full composition and the recording, and that was a moment in time. All of those sounds happened within 4 walls. And that was a thing right there. Now, I'm not knocking the production methods of today, but you listen to a song and, the lead vocal might have been recorded 3 weeks after the bass line, and the drummer might have his part made up out of like 6 or 7 different passes of the take just strung together. So yeah, it's really incredible to listen to something like that and be like, that happened. That happened exactly like it's jotted down on that record right there. That is exactly what that sounded like in the room.
Through your life, is there anything that stands out where it's like an exposure to music, whether it was seeing a show or listening to a record for the first time, where it was like a life-changing, profound moment where nothing was the same again afterwards?
There is one, and if you just Google the web, you're gonna find it. I've said it in so many interviews. It's like I wish I could say something different in each interview, but that was the life-changing experience. It was in the mid 80s. I think it was like 86 or something. And I was hanging out with a bunch of friends on a meadow by a river where I grew up near the town Dessau in East Germany. And we used to had a little bit of a tape trading ring, where people like exchange tapes, which usually were like the 6th or 7th copy of an original Minor Threat record or a Misfits record or something. And we had these East German cassette players called Stern, which means star, mono cassette tape recorders, and they had a wooden frame. So that's what I remember. And we had one of these, and a good friend of mine, his name was Hilly, put on this tape. I was like, you got to hear this. You probably haven't heard anything like this before. And it was the MC5. And I was on it, and I was like listening. I was like, oh my fucking God. What I grew up is like mostly rockabilly because my dad is a proper rock and roll guy and my mom as well. So stuff like Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran was the heaviest I heard by that time. And then all of a sudden someone puts on Kick Out the Jams, Motherfuckers, or Empty Heart or whatever. And I was blown away. That was absolutely rightfully a life-changing experience. This was the moment where all the switches were put into the right direction for me.
Yeah, obviously it's kind of become a cliche now when people talk about like the band that not that many people bought at the time, but like, they kind of, everyone formed a band or they changed people's lives. But I feel like MC5 must have had that impact on so many people because it was really like revolutionary.
Yeah, it was.